It hasn't a prayer of passing, though it nonetheless has some Arkansas politicians wincing. Speaking of salvation, is there really no hope for Arkansas highways? Speaking of money, the cost of college in Arkansas, it's not going down. And some other numbers. What do they portend for Arkansas politics in the decade soon to arrive? Arkansas Week, next.
Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. As in so many broadcasts, the program tonight has a common theme in its various subjects: money. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR, Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Steve Bronner, an independent journalist, and Hal Bass at the Political Science faculty at Ouachita Baptist. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Guys, we had a good look at, or fleshing out anyway, the details anyway, of the administration, the Trump administration's budget, and the one that was kicked over to the Senate recently by the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, and it's being greeted with something, alarm or caution or silence, and in some corners, some cheers. Steve?
Well, presidents present budgets, and Congress takes it for what it is, and Congress has the ultimate power, according to the Constitution, of taxing and spending, and this one in particular was not greeted with a whole lot of interest. Senator Bozeman called it a suggestion. Representative Crawford called it a wish list, and basically most of the other members of the Arkansas delegation said very little or nothing at all about it. It is a very brief document. It's not exactly full of details. Doesn't even include a whole lot about the president's proposed tax cuts, which we know are coming. So at this point, we're still in a major waiting game on what's going to happen. The administration has been slow to propose things, and Congress has had a tough time getting things through. So we're still got to wait and see what the details are and what can get passed. A lot of this stuff was, it was some fairly serious cuts in some popular programs, even things like Meals on Wheels would get major cuts. So even things that make conservative Republicans kind of queasy. So it's got a long ways to go before being passed.
Well, it may be. I'm sure the Hutchinson administration may feel some sympathy for Meals on Wheels, but it's the far larger programs that it has its eye on.
Sure. And the really interesting question for our congressional representatives is how to balance their partisan ideological commitments with the perceived needs and interests of all of their constituents. On the one hand, the proposed budget does reflect some long-standing conservative and Republican values and dreams. On the other, its impact, or its projected impact on Arkansas economy, society, and possibly even politics down the road are potentially substantial here. You referenced earlier Medicaid is the elephant in the room, with our state budget being so dependent on federal Medicaid funds are on the chopping block. Apart from the Meals on Wheels, the broader agricultural supports that are so important in particularly eastern Arkansas are tied legislatively to the food stamp program, which again is vulnerable under this issue. So we've got some challenges. For the time being, I think our representatives kind of punt. But ultimately, there's going to be a reckoning as to where they're going to come down on these issues.
But it's striking that taking a look at the House document and even what's been provided by the administration when it reached the Senate, even the Senate leadership, the Republican leadership said this is going nowhere. We got to start from scratch on this thing, basically.
Yeah, said pretty much dead on arrival, some members of the president's own party. Among the comments that came out after this was released, the cuts to agriculture, that was a big concern. Representative Rick Crawford, the 1st District, dependent on agriculture, and the cuts, I think it was something in the range of 21% to the Department of Agriculture. It would be the elimination of many programs. That had him very disturbed. He did praise some elements like trying to address the national debt, but Representative Steve Womack was quoted as saying that banking on a sustained growth rate of 3% in the economy is a dangerous assumption. So members of Arkansas's congressional delegation were not afraid to take some very harsh words here. Obviously, Arkansas is one of the poorest states in the country, and cuts to the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, food stamps, essentially, that would impact a lot of people, a lot of families, as well as a lot of kids.
In a way, there's really, at its core, there's nothing terribly new about this. The government is spending too much, the debt is growing, so let's cut your program. That's the dynamic in budget talks in every year.
And it basically allows, I wonder if there was ever if this was really a serious document, or if it was meant to just sort of check off some boxes, knowing that the process would kill it anyway. But you could say that you tried to do these things. I mean, for someone who is supposedly not really a Republican, President Trump has basically proposed very conservative policies all the way through, and this budget is very conservative, except for it does nothing about Social Security and Medicare, which are the largest growing government programs by far. So it doesn't even address those. But in many ways, it's a very conservative document, and Republicans in Congress will have a hard time supporting it because in the end, these are programs that affect people.
And he checked the estate tax box too.
Sure, and again, the whole tax issue is very much part of this equation, because you're talking about dealing with the deficit by cutting programs, but not by a consideration of increasing taxes.
I can't think of a single member of the Arkansas delegation who initially supported Mr. Trump. I don't think any of the 6 did. So he wasn't their first choice. And I don't want to say they're stuck with him, but they're stuck with him. I mean, he is the leader of their party. He's the man in the White House, the executive. So what's their posture from here on, to just delicately try to massage in committee as they can while being, faithful to a constituency that voted for him by like 2/3 in Arkansas?
And still supports
kind of a tightrope.
And still supports him.
Yes.
So, I mean, you won't see members of Congress come out in full-throated opposition to President Trump in Arkansas for a while unless something were to happen. And I can hardly see what it would be. They will continue to support him as best they can, and when they can't support him, speak judiciously. But as far as outright opposition to the president, I don't see that happening for a long time.
Contemporary partisanship has a strong negative component to it. That is to say, contemporary partisans appear to be less pro our guy as opposed to anti the other guy here, or the other person.
And I think important too to note that many are going to be up for re-election next year, so they want to be cautious about how they approach this.
Well, speaking of injudicious, and let's not call it injudicious, but exceptionally candid this way. Highway, Steve, one of your big beats. You had 2 Republican members of the General Assembly say this game's up. I mean, there's not a highway program in sight. And I think I'm paraphrasing accurately one of the members who said, it'll take a bridge collapsing and perhaps some other maladies before we can get a handle on this thing.
That was Representative Dan Douglas from Bentonville, who has spent the past 2 sessions trying mightily to get something through the legislature, a transfer of existing funds in 2015 to highways. In 2017, he tried to get a bond issue that would be backed by a gas tax increase, fuel on wholesale fuel prices. It didn't get anywhere either, and he did say at the Rural Development Conference this week that it's going to take a crisis for the legislature to act. Sitting beside him was the current Speaker of the House, Jerry McGillum, who's not one to speak in flourishing in that kind of language. He's very measured in his comments usually, and he's basically affirmed what he was saying. Because the legislature is absolutely not going to do much about highways, there is a movement to have an initiated act where the voters would put a plan through and see if the voters would approve of it. Governor Hutchinson said before that same group yesterday that he would support that direction. He has been highways has not been his thing, to say the least. It's not been a focus of his, and so he expressed support for letting the voters decide, and we'll see where it goes from there. We are at a point now. This has been a long-standing issue. The fuel tax has not been increased in Arkansas since 2001. Federally, it's not been increased since 1993. That's how we mostly fund highways. Meanwhile, costs have gone up, and cars have become more fuel efficient, which means we're paying less money to drive on the same roads that cost more money to fix and aren't being expanded. So there has to be some way of doing something.
It's generally thought, that taxpayers enjoy good roads and are generally quite supportive of highway improvements and construction. So why the great political at the same time, we're recognizing this is a no new tax mood out there in the electorate. No exception even for that? Hal?
Well, I think ultimately there will be, but it's going to take a crisis. That was the realistic assessment that the representatives were putting forward here. It's easy for folks to sit back and criticize the elected officials for not standing up and taking control of a situation here. But what they're pushing back to us is the old pogo line. We've met the enemy and it's us here. And that's essentially asking the public to take the lead in demanding that the highways be improved. Both of the topics we've talked about so far today essentially address a fundamental challenge in representative democracy. And that is, how do the elected representatives relate to their constituents? Are they simply delegates doing what they're instructed? Or are they trustees doing what is best for the public? Or are they partisans? And it seems to me, in an increasingly partisan environment we find ourselves in, we find a greater difficulty in finding common ground, greater difficulty in balancing competing interests, and a greater inclination for a winner-take-all approach to policy making that seems to me is ultimately very difficult to maintain.
We had reached an accommodation during the post-war 20th century anyway, Hal. We had a long-standing agreement with our delegates in Washington. It would occur. I mean, there were limits, but was it Burke or Bacon? Burke. He owes you his judgment as well. And the state allowed its congressional delegation pretty much to use its judgment.
Well, certainly for J. William Fulbright, for Dale Bumpers, they joyfully embraced that trustee role and were rewarded for it by the electorate. I do think that it was a very different structural arrangement in post-war America, in the sense that there was a broad, coherent center with marginal support on the poles, on the ends. We've kind of seen the center disappear in American politics, and the poles become empowered. And that makes for this kind of finding common ground and trusting others much more difficult to maintain.
On to another financial matter, and an economic development matter, and that's higher education. To no one's surprise, the University of Arkansas trustees met this past week, and as with other systems around the state, cost of getting that sheepskin is going to go up.
At the University of Arkansas campuses, anywhere from 2 to 8%. System President Donald Bobbitt said pretty much the increases needed to retain the faculty and staff. That the competition from other schools, the pay in Arkansas isn't really holding up, and that we're losing a lot of talented people. So that's a part of the argument here.
It does Steve, I'm sorry.
Well, state
Higher
funding,
ed's been flatlined now for a number of legislative
decades,
sessions.
not just decades, and not just not being funded more. It doesn't even keep up with inflation. Basically, they get the same amount every year and have for many, many years. And so because of that, as costs go up, there's only two other places where colleges can get the money, either from big donors, and there's a limit to that, or from raising tuition, and they have continued to do that. At the same time, there's more pressures on colleges to do more than there was in the past. The not very nice dorm where I stayed, which was cinder block and hard floors, has been replaced in many places by almost a resort type atmosphere, and that's kind of expected now. And as all these things have happened, and the pressures have been, and the cost, and the expected higher salaries, colleges have had to raise their rates. At the same time, the state is changing its funding formula for higher education,
Right.
where it is now, the dollars will be based more on completion, on graduation, on actual moving toward people to success. And colleges have to be aware that this change is coming. They have to invest more in making sure that students do well, and they have to be aware that there's a possibility that they won't have as much money next year as they are thinking they're going to have, or in a few years. So they're having to make adjustments, and one way you do that is make sure that you've got it coming through tuition.
Al, your campus, privately endowed, not relying on tax dollars, has to be feeling the same sort of pressures, if only from inflation.
Again, to Steve's point, colleges get their funding, if they're public, from the taxpayers' tuition, gifts, and grants. Private colleges lack the taxpayer base, so it's tuition and gifts and grants. And of the two, tuition is easier to manage in a budgetary sense, and therefore it's the most it's the first place you start looking, and then you hope and pray that you can find the gifts and grants to augment tuition, because you can't run a modern university on tuition payments. It's just they're not that elastic.
So many moving parts to it. And as Steve mentioned, even as they lament the cost of getting that degree, students are demanding more of a university as well. I know a certain young lady whose dorm room, or suite, I should say, far outclasses most of the hotel rooms I've stayed in on the road.
And in the meantime, student loan debt has surpassed credit card debt as in the amount that Americans owe. So this process of, we have not begun a process of trying to really think about what needs to happen for college to be affordable. Do you need 4 years? Are there other types of processes? We do have the community college route, but there hasn't been a lot of talk about how to make college a lot more affordable.
Yeah, those 2-year campuses are under the same pressures, really. That
they are, and they're becoming, they're feeder schools for the 4-year schools. A few years ago, I think it was Governor Perry from Texas requested a $10,000 a year, a $10,000 education, and I don't think he got it. But they tried. There was an effort to try to move it down. That hasn't really happened. We still spend a lot of money on higher education, and we're going to continue to spend a lot of money on higher education.
We paused to mention one, I guess you could say, unconventional institution of higher education, and that's in Northwest Arkansas. Not the college per se, but some litigation that has involves that college.
Yeah, this is an ongoing investigation that involves, I want to make sure I get the pronunciation, Ecclesia College up in Northwest Arkansas, which has been involved in an ongoing investigation. You had former state lawmaker Micah Neal, who pleaded guilty in January. And this is alleged by prosecutors to have been a kickback scheme to get state money going toward this college. And on Tuesday, you had a judge delay a trial for former Senator John Woods, as well as the Ecclesia College president, Orrin Paris III, and a consultant, Randall Shelton. But one interesting thing we learned at that is prosecutors said the investigation is ongoing and that more indictments are expected.
Expected.
So that probably has a few people nervous. But that's allowed the trial here to be pushed off. There was also a motion by Paris to have his trial separated from the others. That was declined. But the word that, yes, more indictments are expected, who those could be, that probably, yes, has some people worried.
And an early December, I believe, trial date schedule on that.
Yeah, I think December 3rd, 4th, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Additional details, of course, if there are subsequent indictments, that'll provide more light on that. Now, we also got some numbers, financial aspect to everything, but Hal, we got some mid-decade census figures, early census figures.
Right.
To absolutely nobody's surprise, East and South Arkansas continues to lose population.
Right. The census, of course, is taken every 10 years, but the Census Bureau provides updates in the interim, and a new set of updates came out, essentially confirming the long-standing trends here. State populations has shifted and continues to shift out of the southeast into the northwest. In central Arkansas, the Little Rock metropolitan area is expanding modestly, but within that area, West Little Rock is gaining while North Little Rock is losing in relative terms. And I guess the real question we deal with looking forward is, so what? Where do we go from here? As we approach the 2020 deadlines, they're going to be a catalyst for reapportionment of legislative districts at both the federal and the state level. And what these population shifts are producing is smaller territorial districts in the more heavily populated regions and larger territorial districts in the more lightly populated districts. Focusing just a moment on the federal level, we've got about 3 million people in Arkansas, and we've got 4 congressional seats. That means a little over 700,000 warm bodies for each congressional district. And the question is, how do you draw the lines? And it's obvious from these trends that the 3rd and the 2nd districts are going to shrink territorially as more people are packed into those regions, while the 1st and the 4th are going to expand. And we've got the representational issues that we referred to earlier. We've got the potential for realigning some traditional political structures here, urban versus rural, rich versus poor. If Arkansas continues to look more and more like the rest of the country, and that's where we've been going, one could envision the Democrats anticipating some advances in light of these trends, but for the time being, the Republicans continue to occupy the high ground.
Yeah, does a greater urbanization, for example, does that guarantee a shift to the left necessarily?
Not necessarily, and certainly not culturally, given where particularly Northwest Arkansas has always been in terms of its partisan affiliations anyway. But again, if, a huge word, urbanization correlates with moving in a more left or democratic direction, then yeah, we might see some greater, presence in Northwest Arkansas and in Central Arkansas.
Well, I look to the east, or to the west of us at Texas, where you have, you look at the statewide elected officials in Texas, and they are all to a person archly conservative. But then you have these pockets like in Houston, San Antonio, of course, Austin is always going to be Austin, and Dallas, in which a generally more liberal climate prevails there.
And part of it is cultural as opposed to ideological there. But a lot of it is simply a more diverse population exists in the urban areas than it exists in the rural areas. And that translates into a more, I guess you call it liberal, cultural perspective. But so far in Texas and elsewhere in the South, it hadn't translated into a partisan transformation, because the Republican tide remains strong throughout the region. But it's the margins are narrowing at certainly in the urban areas.
Does that look like, would anybody suggest that looks like the more immediate divide that may be accentuated, and that's rural-urban?
Rural-urban, along with
the next decade.
The class divide, rich versus poor, with the two tending to go hand in hand, with the urban areas or the suburban areas getting more affluent, and the rural areas declining economically as well as numerically.
And the demand for social services in those areas is going to be
Go up.
right. Well, let's just assume for a second that Mr. Westerman will continue to sit for the fourth and Mr. Crawford for the first. They're going to need airplanes within their districts.
Just to manage the constituency relations in these huge territorial settings is increasingly problematical for these folks.
Steve?
Well, the congressional lines that we have now were drawn by Democrats when they were in charge, or at least by when they were the majority and Governor Beebe was in office. And so right now, if you look at the lines, the 3rd district forms this weird U-shape horseshoe above the 4th. You'll see that change. There wouldn't seem to be a reason to gerrymander the districts because Republicans are so dominant. You might see the lines make a little more sense when we redraw them in 2020. But again, as you're saying, there will be other considerations beyond just how do we make these districts have the right number of people and look right. There will be other considerations such as the urban-rural divide.
Yeah, got to leave it there because we're out of time. Guys, thanks to you all for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Local broadcast of Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the award-winning Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, Arkansas's largest major newspaper, bringing you local, national, and international news since 1819. By the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.